TSN's Motoring 94 is brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, one tough motor oil. And Midas. For brake, exhaust, suspension, and steering service, trust your car to Midas.
You know, there was a time back in the 70s when we wondered if we'd have any fuel left in the future to power our vehicles. Well, today when we talk about the future, we question whether we'll even need any gasoline. In an effort to protect the environment, it's no secret that a lot of research is going into alternative fuels, natural gas, propane, ethanol, methanol, electric, and so on. Well, this week we're going to begin by looking at one of the most talked about alternative fuels, hydrogen.
To many people, mankind's use of hydrogen represents this or this. In reality, hydrogen has been NASA's fuel of choice when it comes to launching the space shuttle. The very successful use of hydrogen as a clean source of fuel has led to the possibility that cars of the future will also use as pollution-free fuel.
Well, there's a long heritage here in Canada. We started with hydroelectric power with the idea of converting it to fuel because we were importing all our fuel. And we have an industrial hydrogen plant business that supports all our energy activities with hydrogen. But we now see hydrogen coming forward very strongly as a transportation fuel. Well, the electrolyzer part of it is really the part of the hydrogen supply infrastructure for the vehicle. Very important that the fuel supply be there for this advanced technology. And what the electrolyzer does is split water into hydrogen and oxygen, with the primary energy being renewable. That's the sun or the wind or hydroelectric or any sustainable energy such as nuclear can be used to make hydrogen, which means that you can make the hydrogen fuel for the vehicle just about anywhere in the world. The cell here is illustrating the system of using the sun's energy to convert to electricity in what they call photovoltaic panels, and then directly connecting that electricity to an electrolytic cell, which splits water into its components, hydrogen and oxygen gases. The hydrogen is then led into a storage element to operate a vehicle, so that you can make the hydrogen at a fueling depot or at your house. There's actually sufficient area in the roof of your house to generate enough electricity to maintain the energy supply for the house and your vehicle. Hydrogen, of course, is a very explosive material, and if it weren't that, it wouldn't be any use as a fuel. But it has certain characteristics which mean that if you apply it properly, it can be at least as safe, if not safer, than the conventional fueling systems we're using today, such as gasoline or natural gas. Some of these characteristics, the most notable one is it's the lightest substance on Earth, so if there's a fuel leak, that fuel will leave the area immediately, so that with properly ventilated spaces, you do not collect a hydrogen mixture around an area where you don't want it. The other feature about hydrogen is the way you can carry it in the vehicle, and Mazda have developed the metal hydride approach. This is like a metal alloy sponge that absorbs hydrogen, and if there is an accident, and even if these containers should break, the metal hydride spills out onto the road, it's not going to burn. It's going to cool down, in fact, and it's not like releasing a liquid fuel onto the road that can burn. So, properly applied, hydrogen can produce safer transportation.
Mazda released their first hydrogen-powered car, the HRX, about a year ago. The second generation was on display at the Toronto International Auto Show.
HRX2 is a concept car that's designed to, illustrate two elements of Mazda's environmental program. One, it runs on hydrogen gas, which is a clean emission fuel. There's no harmful carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide emissions. Secondly, the HRX2 is designed in a way to be totally recyclable. It's designed to be built out of recyclable plastic that can be used over and over. And it's also designed in such a way to make it easy to recycle. Hydrogen has an early combustion point, and with a rotary engine we have a separate intake chamber, combustion chamber, and exhaust chamber. And what this allows us to do is when the fuel is injected to keep it relatively cool, and then compress and combust and exhaust all in separate chambers as the rotor moves in the rotor housing. In a conventional piston engine, all of that happens in the chamber and you get backfire.
Also being demonstrated was a hydrogen-powered Jetta equipped with a rotary engine. So the technology is there. The question now is, when will that technology be available to the general public?
Already the hydrogen car is going to be able to be used by the end of the 1990s. It will be actually usable. However, for popular use, very widespread use, I expect it will be between the year 2010 and 2020.
Well, today the hydrogen systems are pilot systems. I like to call it handmade by PhDs in some senses. And there's no question that with the advances of technology toward the reduction of manufacturing cost, and with the wonderful mass production techniques of the automobile industry applied to the generation of the hydrogen, to the equipment to generate the hydrogen, these costs will come down. And I think we can look to the time when hydrogen, based on renewable and sustainable energy sources, will in fact be competitive with conventional fuels today in cost per mile.
Test Drive with Graham Fletcher.
This week on Test Drive, we're out in the middle of nowhere putting a 1994 Yukon through its paces. Now, as you can see, it's parked way up atop this hill. That gives you an idea as to how good it is when it gets to off-roading. Does it match its performance when it comes to on-road? We'll let you know later. Okay?
Yeah, let's do it.
This is the time of the test drive where it truly tests your nerve. This is the leap of faith. You've got no horizon except for the one ahead of you. Bonsai! Yes, we made it.
It's fess-up time for me because the Yukon style of vehicle has long baffled me. They always seem too big and unwieldy for most situations. Well, I can tell you, my time behind the wheel of this gentle giant put things into perspective. New stuff for 94 includes a new grille, side impact door beams, an improved electronic automatic transmission, and a new 6.5-litre V8 turbo diesel engine. Power is rated at 180 horsepower and a truly tremendous 360 pounds-feet of torque. The amazing part being that this level of torque is generated at just 1700 RPM. Obviously, with grunt that low down, this engine is ideally suited for towing or off-roading. Slip this beast into four-wheel drive low and you feel as though you could drive up the outside of the Empire State Building. During the off-road session, the Yukon sauntered up some steep grades with the engine barely off idle. When it comes to towing, the Yukon will pull a 6,000-pound trailer with ease. The gross combined weight rating is no less than 13,000 pounds when properly equipped.
One of the interesting pieces of technology on this Yukon is a thing called drive-by-wire. In a conventional setup, you have an accelerator cable that links the gas pedal to the engine. In this vehicle, there is no cable. What you have is a sensor at the pedal end and a small motor at the engine end. Between the two, a simple piece of electrical wire. Now, this piece of technology is really interesting because it makes this truck a lot easier to drive than it might otherwise be.
The primary benefit of the drive-by-wire technology is precise throttle control. Aside from the initial startup noise produced, there is not a downside to this engine. Indeed, it's so good I could live with the obnoxious smell of diesel, and believe me, that takes a lot of doing. The optional auto box is greatly improved, especially when it comes to shift quality. The whole setup slips up and down the box in an almost undetectable manner. The suspension is comprised of torsion bars up front and two-stage leaf springs in back. There are a couple of noteworthy items here.
The torsion bars offer better ground clearance, while the two-stage rear springs offer good unladen comfort as well as solid support when loaded. Off-road, the ride comfort is surprisingly good. Definitely no need for a kidney belt here. My pet peeve on the Yukon has to do with the tailgate configuration. Now, while I like the fact that the glass opens independently from the tailgate, I don't like the fact that it is a tailgate and it drops down. When you come time to put anything heavy into this vehicle, it becomes rather awkward. The really difficult part, though, is retrieving it. You've got to sort of reach all the way back in there to try and pull it out. If they had an all-in-one lift-up tailgate, things would be a lot better, and this truck would be a lot more user-friendly. The other point that should be addressed is the amount of space the spare tyre takes up. Even with the rear seats folded down, its intrusion is an annoyance. Elsewhere, the Yukon has more in common with a Cadillac than the trucks of old. The seats are comfortable and the dash extremely comprehensive. The downside to the whole affair is the number of buttons. Believe it or not, the driver is challenged with no fewer than 50. Because of the sheer number, both the radio and climate controls are difficult and awkward to use. A radical rethink is desperately in order here. The fit and finish of the interior is very good, as is the attention to detail. There are some handy storage compartments mounted on the roof, and the huge center box console houses a couple of handy cup holders. Stopping power is provided by a disc drum setup complete with anti-lock on all four wheels. The booster power differs from the norm because GM used their Hydro Boost system. Rather than using engine vacuum, they use a hydraulic pressure supplied by the power steering pump. While different in design, the desired goal is achieved. The stops are short and controlled and the pedal feel good. In short, a job well done. Well, that's it for another test drive. As I indicated off the top, this Yukon is very, very good when it comes to off-roading. It's also not too shabby when it comes to the highway performance. We're doing about 100 kilometers an hour now, and there's very little noise from the tires, nor is there very much engine noise for the big 6.5-litre turbo diesel. The capper, though, the ride comfort is excellent. It's as good as any car you'll find. As with our other long-term testers, it's time to take a look at the cost of operating our VW Jetta for the first 24,000 kilometers. If you go by the book, Volkswagen suggests that you have the oil and filter changed every 12,000 kilometers. This would give you an annual bill of $197.10. However, as in the past, I think it's false economy and foolhardy to neglect the car in this manner. Therefore, I suggest following the modified schedule recommended by the dealer. This would bump the bill to $277.80. While not cheap, it is a palatable figure. As far as fuel economy is concerned, we're averaging 8.3 litres per 100 kilometres or 34 miles per gallon. This figure is much better than anticipated. When you factor in the cost of fuel and maintenance, you end up with a respectable cost of 5.6 cents per kilometre. This figure is better than average.
What you're seeing is an exercise known as the teeter-totter. They tell me this driver will show, and is showing, what great control he has over this vehicle by balancing it. Now, you may recognize the vehicle as the brand new Land Rover Discovery. We did a test drive on it just a few weeks ago. And you may be asking yourself right now, what's a Discovery doing on a teeter-totter? We're here to find out.
So we're here in Mississauga, Ontario, Brad, and we're launching Discovery, probably the biggest step in our company's short history in Canada. We've got over 40 journalists from all over Canada have come here to try the vehicle. We want to show it to them. We've got an off-road course here for them to try it. We've got some on-road vehicles for them to try as well. So they'll have a good first-hand view of what this vehicle is all about.
Now, as you know, we test drove the Discovery on Motoring 94 just recently, but what does this vehicle mean for Land Rover?
This is a big, big step for us. With its pricing being at $39,995, it's going to compete almost head-on with the fully equipped Ford Explorers and Grand Cherokees, And also the fully equipped minivans that have four-wheel drive. They're up there in that price range as well. And with the seating capacity of Discovery, it has potentially 7 passenger seating. And we saw the sport utility market growing. We were in it in the thick of things, and many people say in the luxury sport utility as a vehicle that does more than just off-roading. We started it all in 1970 with the Range Rover in Europe and the UK. So it's nothing new to us. We just have a vehicle now that we can offer to a much larger group of customers, and the volumes will naturally expand our exposure for sure.
Okay, now let's head to the garage and join our favorite mechanic, Bill Gardner.
If you own or operate a Ford fuel-injected vehicle, which is just about anything since about 1986, there's something that you should be aware of. Those Fords with fuel injection, be they cars or light trucks, use a fuel pump shut-off switch, sometimes referred to as an inertia switch. It's located somewhere on the vehicle's body. In the case of a passenger car, it's usually in the trunk area, either back here, on the side, or up at the front of the trunk. If it's a light truck, it's located in the cab. Now what you should do is refer to your owner's manual to find the location of that device, because there may be instances where you're going to have to reset that. Now the intention of this device is to shut off the fuel pressure, which is quite high in these vehicles. 36 to 42 psi isn't uncommon on some of them. It shuts off that fuel pressure in the event of a collision, so that if the fuel lines on the car should become severed in that collision, you won't have fuel spraying under high pressure that could create a fire. But if somebody smacks your car even slightly in a parking lot, you may never have been aware that they've even done it. There could be no damage to your vehicle, but that shut-off switch could have tripped and your engine won't start. We get service calls all the time where we're called out to restart these vehicles, and it's as simple as pressing the button. I'm going to smack this one with my bare hand, and the car's going to shut off a few seconds later when the fuel pressure dies. Now on this Topaz, it's just up in the corner of the trunk. You can see that yellow label that flags its location. And there it goes. One smack and it's dead. Here's the location of the fuel pump cutoff switch on this Topaz. If you're in any doubt though, consult your owner's manual. Now it's in the tripped position now. I've given it a smack, and all I need to do to reset it is press the button down, that little white flag down with my finger. I heard the click, I know it's reset. We'll have fuel pressure now and the car will restart. Now remember that this is a safety feature Ford has engineered into their cars and light trucks. But as you've seen today, it doesn't take a heck of a lot to trip that fuel pump shutoff switch. So what I'm advising you to do is, first of all, familiarize yourself with the location of that switch on the passenger cars it's in the trunk, on the light trucks it's in the cab. And also familiarize yourself on how to reset it. It's all in your owner's manual. If you consult it, it will tell you the exact procedure and location. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 94.
This particular vehicle is the '93 Ford Ecostar. It is based on a European Escort van. Early in the electric vehicle program, we had decided we wanted a vehicle that was unique to the North American markets and a utility-style vehicle. So we chose the European van that is built out of Halewood, England, and converted to an all-electric vehicle. The power supply on board these vehicles will be a ABB sodium-sulfur battery system. Sodium-sulfur batteries were invented by Ford Motor Company in 1965. It operates at 300 degrees Celsius. It has a driving range of over 100 miles. Here is a very major component of the vehicle, and that is the powertrain. It is a 75 horsepower AC three-phase induction motor and a single-speed transmission. The entire package weighs approximately 190 pounds. Each vehicle has its own charger on board. Remove the plug from the front of the vehicle and plug it into a special receptacle that Ford will provide. Or, in the event that the driver has gone to a location where that receptacle isn't available, he's able to sleeve an adapter on this plug itself and plug into a 120-volt outlet. With this type of battery system is overnight charging.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns proper break-in procedure for a new engine, be it in a brand new car or a reconditioned or rebuilt engine in your used car. Now most of these items are just plain common sense. First of all, it doesn't hurt at all to warm the engine up for a minute or two, but don't get carried away and leave the car idling. And that's another thing you want to avoid, of course, is prolonged idling once the engine's up to operating temperature. If you're stuck in traffic, shift it into neutral for a minute or two and shut it off if necessary. Now, you also want to vary the speeds as much as possible, so city driving is probably the ideal condition to break a new engine in. If you're on the highway, however, avoid sustained high speeds and occasionally lift your foot right off the throttle and let the engine coast down a little bit. The high vacuum that's produced when you decelerate helps to bring a little bit of extra oil up the cylinder walls to the top piston ring. Also, if you're driving around the city or even on the highway, the occasional full throttle burst for several seconds will help to seat the piston rings, and some engine manufacturers actually recommend that. Also, remember to check the oil and coolant levels frequently, particularly the engine oil, because brand new engines can and will in some cases consume extra quantities of oil during that break-in procedure. Not a problem as long as you keep it topped up. And lastly, remember not to use any oil or fuel additives during the break-in procedure, because in some cases they may actually hamper the break-in of a new engine. That's your Midas tip of the week.
We're cranking this Land Rover Discovery across this river to see some Mayan ruins. And it's one of these deals you just can't get good help anymore. You got to do things yourself if you want to get them done. Besides, I left my Nordic track at home.
Kenzie's Corner with Jim Kenzie.
This is the latest product from the Land Rover company. It's called the Discovery. It's a family-oriented 4x4 downscale from the very expensive Range Rover. We're going to be telling you more about the Discovery on a later show. The story today isn't so much what we drove, but where we drove it. As you can see from the mud, it wasn't an easy trip. I'm standing in the main plaza of Caracol, which is one of the great cities of the Mayan civilization. It flourished here in the Belizean tropical rainforest for over 2,000 years. One of the main problems with the Mayan civilization from an archaeological point of view is that all their monuments were made of limestone. And limestone deteriorates very rapidly, particularly in the acid rain that our modern civilization is creating. So what archaeologists have found is the best way to preserve these monuments for future generations is to form replicas of them. The original pieces of stone are taken back to a museum. A casting is made with silicone material and fiberglass, and the replica has been brought back here. Now, this is the first time one of these stone columns, called a stela, has been returned to its original site here in Belize. Now, the Land Rover company has a great reputation, a great history of supporting archaeological expeditions of this nature. This particular one is appropriately named an expedition of discovery. I'm Jim Kenzie from the Belizean tropical rainforest.
Well, I'll tell you one thing Jim Kenzie did not find in Belize, and that was a tow truck. And next week we begin a two-part series on the tow truck industry and the people driving them. That's next week as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
TSN's Motoring 94 has been brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, one tough motor oil. And Midas, for brake, exhaust, suspension, and steering service. Trust your car to Midas.